On a Friday evening in March, I made the difficult decision to suspend in-person worship at Trinity. I didn't expect this suspension to last long, but now, 7 months later, we are still living in a sort of exile. Our forebears in the faith knew exile all too well. After being deported from her home and exiled in the land of Babylon, the psalmist writes, "By the waters of Babylon, we sat down and wept when we remembered you, O Zion." And in another psalm, the psalmist, lamenting his distance from the temple, says, "How dear to me is your dwelling, O Lord of hosts. My soul has a desire and a longing for the courts of the Lord." For the last few months, we have wept by the waters of Babylon and have longed for the courts of the Lord. But we have not done so as a people without hope, because even in the midst of exile, God's promises are sure. In our Holy Scriptures, we read about how the prophet Jeremiah bore witness to this hope when he buys up property in the land of Israel, even though he knows full well that Israel is about to be conquered by her foes and her people about to be driven into exile. He buys land in a war zone. He invests in property that he might not see again for a long, long time, if ever. He puts his resources into a place and a space wrecked by Babylon, and I imagine that some of the prophet's friends must have said, "Jerry, you need to reconsider your investment portfolio. You need to put your resources into Babylonian stock because Israel is about to be thrown out." But Jeremiah bought the land anyways because he knew that one day the people would return. He knew that one day the people would worship in their holy spaces once again. Jeremiah did not lose hope, and so he buys property in a promised land even though it didn't look all that promising at the time. All because he knew that God does not go back on God's promises, not even in the midst of exile. My brothers and sisters, we have experienced exile this year, but we have not lost hope. Exile from our physical building has not kept us from investing in the beloved community, an investment that looks like digital church services, virtual Bible studies, personal phone calls, masked demonstrations for social justice, voter registration drives, curbside Trinity food ministry grocery service, sanitized and sanctified pilgrimage visits, at-home Sunday school sessions, Grubhub food deliveries, prayers for fellow parishioners, remote gatherings for contemplation, and so much more. Yes, we closed our doors, but we did not suspend our mission. We, like Jeremiah, bought property in the land of promise. You, my friends, have invested in the beloved community during this time of exile, because God keeps God's promises. God's promises inspire hope, and hope generates love. You have been incredibly generous in your giving, your prayers, and your service. And for that, I am grateful. Jeremiah invested in promised land property because he had a deep and abiding hope that God does not abandon God's children, and that the people would, someday, find their way back to the land of promise. And so in the spirit of Jeremiah, I ask you to prayerfully consider making a generous financial pledge to Trinity for 2021. Your pledge makes the ministry happening right now at Trinity possible and serves as a sign of hope in God's promises for today and for tomorrow. COVID-19 will likely continue to shape our ministries and our life together well into next year and beyond. But regardless of the status of the COVID pandemic, thanks to your generosity, we will continue to live into our commitment to the radical gospel of Christ, that calls us to worship God, welcome the seeker, sustain the faithful, and serve those in need. God has good things in store for our community in 2021. By God's grace and thanks to your generosity, we will have a brand new roof next year and are making some much needed renovations to our worship space that will make coming back together in person even more exciting. I'm also looking forward to grow our ministries and relationships with folks in the neighborhood next year, with the potential help of a new staff member hired specifically for that purpose. I believe that 2021 will be a year of return and life-giving transformation for Trinity. And so I ask that you support your church by submitting a financial pledge. You can make a pledge of any amount. No pledge is too small to make a difference, and all pledges are greatly appreciated. You can submit your pledge right now by visiting www.trinitycwe.org/pledge. There you'll also find a few FAQs about pledging and how to give. Thank you again for your generosity and for your demonstration of hope in this time of exile. God bless.